our privilege to have with us tonight Walid Shoebat, who comes from the heritage of a grandfather who was a Muslim chieftain. Matter of fact, his great-grandfather was also a fighter, and that heritage continued on throughout the family. As a young man, he was a member of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and he participated himself in acts of terror and violence against Israel. He was later imprisoned in the Russian compound, which was Jerusalem's central prison, for incitement and violence against Israel. After his release, Walid continued his life of violence and rioting in Bethlehem and the Temple Mount. And after entering the United States, he worked as a counselor for the Arab Student Organization based in Chicago at a college there, and he continued his anti-Israeli and anti-Israel activities even in that position. But it was in 1993 that Walid had studied the Jewish Bible and a challenge to convert his wife to Islam. And after a number of months of intense study, he realized that everything he had been taught about Jews was a lie. His eyes were opened to the truth of Christianity. Walid is an American citizen. He lives here in the United States. He's authored numerous books, of which we mentioned here earlier, and on the back table here. He's been in high demand, appearing on national television and news shows all over the world and here across the United States, even within the last 24 to 36 hours. Let's give a warm welcome tonight to Walid Shoebat.
Thank you very much. You may be seated. Thank you. I don't know why it gets so uncomfortable for me when I see 1,000 or more people. But I should not be scared, because they are my fellow countrymen and people who would love me and support me. I don't even know why I carry notes with me. I rarely ever use them. It's like a baby blanket. Everyone has to have one, so I'll spread these things round about like this, and it'll take me half hour to warm up. Brother Vic told me that President Reagan spoke here. There's one favorite line I like that President Reagan said, that somebody in the crowd stood up and said, "Hail Reagan." Remember that scene? "Hail Reagan," treat him as a Nazi. And he responded, he said, "Ah, shut up. If it wasn't for my generation, you'll be saying hail to someone else." They can say that the Bible is corrupt, but we can't say the Quran is corrupt. Everyone can say that Christianity is a violent religion and the Bible is filled with violence. Yet none of us can say that Islam is violent. We must say that Islam is a peaceful religion, and that's what they tell me. You better say Islam is a peaceful religion, or we will kill you. The peaceful religion, my friends, is the one that when people curse at it, its followers pray for you. Christianity, my friend, is the peaceful religion. But I learned all my life as a child that the Bible has been corrupted. I grew up as a Muslim. The Bible has been changed. Who changed the Bible? Of course, the Jews changed the Bible. The Jews changed the Old Testament. The Christians changed the New Testament. In fact, virtually all Muslims believe the Bible has been corrupt. Finally, I learned, when I read the Bible in 1993, that indeed the Bible was corrupted. But before you throw tomatoes at me and crucify me, hear me out. The Islamic religion took pieces from the Apocrypha, pieces from the Bible, added its own ideology into the text, and created a new text which was the corruption of the Bible. The Quran is a corruption of the Bible. The corruptors accused the innocent of corruption. The haters accuse the ones who love with hate. They make the weddings funerals and they make the funerals weddings. Everything is upside down, confusing to the whole world, and the whole world must kowtow and bow down to it and say that Islam is a peaceful religion. I once remember a little incident when I was a teenager in high school. I was going to school that day in Bethlehem. My school was next to a place that is a memorial for the Jews called Rachel's Tomb. I never knew who Rachel was, neither did my Muslim teachers teach me who Rachel was, and every day I stand by the bus stop right there, look behind me, Rachel's tomb. Who was Rachel? Nobody said anything about Rachel. It was a place for the Jews. One time I was walking around about there, and a construction truck with a yellow license plate, which means it's an Israeli construction truck, accidentally struck a girl. And as he tried to call for help, he had a wireless in the truck, he tried to call for help to help the girl. And as soon as we saw the situation, we instantly carried rocks and began to stone the truck. As the guy was bleeding from his forehead, he's still calling for help for the girl. He finally realized that a crowd of 100 or so students surrounding the truck could be very detrimental for his health. He made a U-turn and got out of Dodge. We went back to school, of course, and the school body got together. We had 1,000 students in our school, just the same number as here. And we were trying to decide what to make up of this incident. And a blind student, blind since birth, rose his cane in the sky, and he says, by Allah, he struck that girl intentionally. The Jews want to kill Palestinians. This was done intentionally. And the entire school erupted in a riot in which they had to get riot control, tear gas, and there was some broken bones. It was a pretty bad situation. It took me years to rethink this scenario. It was only in 1993 when I began to read the Bible and I began to review my entire life. I asked myself a question. I said, that incident, that man was blind. How could he testify to an incident he could have never seen? But that's not the erroneous part of the story. The crazy part of the story is that how could 1,000 students follow him? Blind leading the blind is very usual in the Middle East. This is why I always like to say that the element of what's missing in our culture is critical thinking. I didn't learn critical thinking those days, of course. Only in 1993 I began to really think in a critical fashion. In 1991 I took a trip to the Middle East. I went back home. And as I started with my uncle on this trip, he was driving me in the cities of Ramallah, Nablus, Bethlehem, all over the place. I saw graffiti all over the walls. Now, my mind is not used to the graffiti that I grew up with all my life. I lived in America for a few years, and I asked my uncle, I said, Uncle, why do we have so much graffiti in our town and all the other towns? I couldn't find a square meter that didn't have graffiti. Either whitewashed graffiti or fresh graffiti. What did the graffiti say? That the most famous graffiti that permeated the Palestinian streets was نقرع أبواب الجنة بجماجم اليهود. We knock on the gates of heaven with the skulls of Jews. Uncle, is there a different way to go to heaven besides knocking on the gates of heaven with the skulls of them Jews? You asked too many questions. That trip, coming back from America, developed critical thinking. I was criticized all the time that I asked too many questions. The Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, said, كره الله قيل وقال وكثرة السؤال. Allah hated too many questions. Then I took another trip to Hebron. I took a taxi cab in Hebron, a Mercedes taxi cab, and when it reached to downtown Hebron, I witnessed something that began to make me think. There was a community of Jews that took a bus, a public bus, the Kiryat Arba community, and every time they get into that bus, Palestinians gathered together and began to hail stones at the bus. You could barely see the bus, had wire mesh, bulletproof glass, and You could barely see the people in the bus because of the rocks like locusts. Of course, the taxi cab driver wanted to make a U-turn. I said, stop right here. I rolled down my window and I began to watch this incident. I began to talk to the taxi cab driver. I said, you know, why do we do this? Why do we stone this bus? He says, well, they're Jews. I says, well, so? Well, they shouldn't be here. I said, why not? Well, they're settlers. This is Palestinian land. I says, well, we have 1.2 million Palestinians living in Israel proper. They're in Jewish territory, in Israeli territory. No one stones their buses, and they worship towards Mecca 5 times a day. Nobody harasses them. You can take a prayer rug and go to Israel proper and pray in the street towards Mecca. Nobody harms you. Why can't these Jews live amongst us? I began to think, could it be racism? Could it be religious hatred? Could it be other things and besides the normal things that I was always taught, that the reason we as Muslims used to riot and get angry, maybe it's because of occupation. I began to review myself, and well, 3/4 of suicide bombing exist in Muslim countries that have no occupation. Could it be poverty? At one university, I remember speaking about the subject, and the professor stood up and he says, maybe, Walid, the reason we have terrorism is because there's poverty in the Muslim world. If we remove poverty, especially in the Palestinian areas, in Gaza, so on and so forth, perhaps we won't have any more suicide bombers. I says, well, you know, let me ask the students, see what they think. So I remember seeing a student from India with a big turban, Sikh, and I wanted him to answer the question. So I said, well, is anybody here from India? And I acted like I wasn't looking at him. And as I turned around and he's raising his hand all excited, I'm from India. I said to him, well, you know, do you have poverty in your country? He says, we got lots of poverty, Mr. Shoebat, lots of poverty. You know that Indian accent? I said, do you guys have suicide bombing as a result of poverty? He says, Mr. Shoebat, we got lots of poverty in India. We don't blow ourselves up. But however, they come from Pakistan and for some reason they blow us up. Sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. Even the Pope made a statement. He said, Islam must never be propagated through violence. Well, you know, if I talk to any pastor in this place, Christian pastor, say, hey, you know, we need a sermon. The title of the sermon should be, Christianity shall not be propagated through violence. They would love it. No problem. However, the Muslim world took offense to the Pope's remarks. So they took to the street millions of Muslims worldwide carrying a banner that says, Islam means peace. Islam is a peaceful religion. And they expressed the peacefulness of Islam through sheer violence. If that doesn't explain it all, I don't know what else will. This is why I say I can go to a farm country in this beautiful land of America. I can speak to farmers who chew tobacco. And I can talk for half hour on terrorism. And usually, you know, somebody will stand up and go, I get it. Yet when I go to university campuses, to the most educated of this country, and I speak till I'm blue at the face, they'll never get it. Is it an issue of education? If education is the place where, if university is the place where we can have critical thinking, then why every time I go to a university there's demonstrations outside? Well, Mr. Shoebat is racist. Am I? I don't understand. When I used to walk the streets of Chicago with thousands of Muslims demonstrating with a loudspeaker, who runs the Congress? Israel does. Who runs the media? Israel does. Khaybar, Khaybar ya Yahud, Jaysh Muhammad sawfa yaud. Jews, will remind you of Khaybar. The army of Muhammad is coming back for you. If that's not racism, I don't know what else is. We're going to kill the Jews. Yet when I shed the mantle of hatred, and I began to rethink through critical thinking, and I thank God for America, because it's a country or a land where people can have critical thinking. I began to ask myself the question, I don't understand. I remember in Chicago, the media used to come, and here we were, pro-terrorism, and they basically viewed us as freedom fighters. We were freedom fighters. But the day I shed the mantle of hatred, I decided to change my religion, became Christian, and I decided that I don't hate Jews, I love Jews. That's when I became a racist, bigoted, Islamophobic, Bible-thumping Christian. Go figure. Islamophobe. It's a sticky label that is applied to anyone with critical thinking about Islam. Anyone who's critical thinker about Islam, it doesn't matter. They can be moderate, not even as high tone as myself. They're still Islamophobes. Yet let's examine the word Islamophobia, even phobia itself. Phobia is fear of something. If you're afraid of heights, you got phobia of heights. If you're afraid of tunnels, you got phobia of tunnels. But how is it possible you can call somebody phobic of heights and they take air gliding trips and jump off mountaintops and call them phobic? They are addressing heights and facing it head on. How is it that if I am here standing in front of you addressing Islam with no fear, how could I have a phobia? Phobia is fear of something. I fear nothing except the God that made me. While Muslims threaten my life and want to take it away and snuff it away, I know that they can take my body and kill me, but they cannot take my soul. Could it be possible what we're dealing with is Islamophobia phobia? So maybe the solution is that every American should be a proud Islamophobe and move on. I'm a proud Islamophobe. I confess. Okay. Record that little clip and air it everywhere. But at least I have what is called confession. But how did I learn confession? Confession, to say you were wrong, to stand up in front of a crowd of people and say, I was wrong, is confession. Confession is something that stems from the Bible. It is the roots of how God wants us to behave. Without confession of your sins, of what you did wrong, there's no healing. God cannot heal a person who doesn't confess. The West confesses many things. Germany confessed the Holocaust. God can forgive Germany for killing 6 million Jews. He can. In Germany today, it is illegal to deny the Holocaust. You go to jail. Yet in Turkey, it is illegal to talk about the Armenian genocide. To discuss the genocide is illegal in Turkey. Islam spread throughout the Middle East. It spread throughout the world through jihad warfare. Spain was occupied. Many countries were taken away. Sudan, Middle East, Egypt, Syria, Iran, shedding of blood of millions of people. Tariq bin Ziyad went through Spain. Europe was in danger from Islamic jihadists. Yet, when you talk to a Muslim and say, do you confess that the occupation of Islam, of Christian lands, and killing so many Christians, do you confess this is wrong? No. In fact, I remember having a conversation with Zuhdi Jasser. Zuhdi Jasser is a peaceful Muslim. He is Muslim, and he's a secular Muslim, and he's a doctor. I respect him. I got no problem with Zuhdi Jasser's work. He condemns terrorism openly, and he is a Muslim that is peaceful. And I remember speaking at a synagogue. We shared our testimonies, our stories, and after the event, I asked Mr. Jasser a question. I said, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, you're an intelligent person. I have a question to ask. How do you deal with the story when Muhammad killed the Jews of Saudi Arabia? Muhammad executed the Jews of Banu Qurayza, beheaded all the men in a trench, and then took the women as concubines. How do you justify this? He thought about the question and he says, well, they had a fair trial. They had a fair trial from an intelligent doctor who works with Americans to fight fundamentalist Islam. He himself seems to have a problem because, you see, I learned from the man from my own village to ask Jesus-style questions. You know the Jesus-style question? When the Pharisees came to Jesus and asked him, by what right do you speak? He said, by what right does John the Baptist speak? Had they said John the Baptist has a right to speak because he's a prophet, then he said that Jesus was the Messiah. Had they said John the Baptist has no right to speak, the crowds believed John the Baptist was a prophet, they would be stoned. That's what I call questions, Jesus-style checkmate. I love to ask those kinds of questions because you don't know what questions to ask a Muslim. How do you justify it? Because if he said, well, it was wrong, then everything in his faith in Islam falls apart. He has to say it was justified because he must teach that Islam is a peaceful religion. To say Islam is not a peaceful religion, then he's no longer a Muslim. If Islam was a peaceful religion, then why are we supposed to be killed for our freedom of speech? Why am I supposed to be killed for standing up in front of you and telling you that I left Islam? Why does leaving Islam detrimental for your life? Because Muhammad says, Tariq ad-din yuqtal. Anyone who leaves the faith of Islam, kill him. What part of kill do you Americans not understand? The Quran says, فَإِن تَوَلَّوْا فَخُذُوهُمْ وَأُقْتُلُوهُمْ. If they leave the faith, then kill them, take them and kill them wherever you find them. Kill them wherever you find them. A lady asked me, she says, you know, you should talk to the military. You should address our military, our army. They need to hear your message. You need to understand what Islam is. I said, ma'am, I can't go to the military. I did go to the Air Force one time, spoke at the Air Force Academy in Colorado. When I spoke at the Air Force Academy in Colorado, many who were, the leaders of their little group did not want the Air Force cadet to hear our message at all because we were Islamophobes. A student comes up, 200 Middle Eastern from the Middle East, came up to this event. This is all high security stuff. And here they were allowed to come to the event, and one of them came privately and threatened my colleague Kamal Salim that he should be killed for what he is doing. Kamal, concerned, talked to the security. They didn't know how to find this person because he went roundabout. It's a huge compound. I said, bring me the roster. I can tell you which one it is. And I picked the man from the name, from the roster, several man names. I said, here's your priorities. Here's the highest priority. They found that name and they brought him. And indeed, that was the guy. The media was there. Of course, they never reported the threat. The second day, it was all over the media that Walid was spreading Christianity at the Air Force Academy. I was asked a question. The question was, how do you combat terrorism? How do you combat Islamic terrorism? I said, every single terrorist that I know shed the mantle of hatred by conversion to Christianity. It's a change of mind. The New Testament says, offer yourselves as a living sacrifice. As a living sacrifice. I did not have to offer myself as a dead sacrifice. Muhammad said that by the first drop of the martyr's blood, not only he will enter paradise, but he becomes an intercessor for 70 members of his or her family. Islam has intercession. In fact, at UC Davis, the Muslim students were sitting there giggling throughout my whole speech. I says, you don't believe that Jesus could be a redeemer because no man can redeem for another man's sin. I said, excuse me. You deny that anyone can intercede. Intercession doesn't exist in Islam. The Quran says, وَلَا تَزِرُ وِزْرَةٌ. I forgot the verse even. I've been trying to cut down on the Quran as I learned the Bible so much. وَلَا تَزِرُ وِزْرَةٌ أُخْرَى, something like that. That no one can intercede for another man's sin. And I says, well, how do you respond? Jesus-style question, of course. How does the martyr intercede for someone else's sin? In Islam, it's very clear. The Quran says, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٌ بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. Do not think that the ones who die for the cause of Allah are dead, but are alive with Allah, receiving His blessings. The Muslim shedding his blood in battlefield, dying for the cause of Allah, Muhammad says by the first drop of the martyr's blood, he enters paradise. Then he becomes an intercessor for 70 members of his or her family. Islam does have intercession, even though it denies it. But it's not the blood of Jesus Christ that sends you to heaven. It is the blood of a sinner. It is the blood of a terrorist or a jihadist, somebody who fights in warfare. It's not only in self-defense. Islam is not a religion that teaches that jihad is only self-defense, as they tell you. If you want to know what jihad means, you can't go to the website and go to Google and put the word jihad. You're going to get nothing but confusion. You gotta type the word jihad or Islam in the Arabic language. Then you will understand all about it. If you review the first 100 websites, I did it myself, you can try it, get a good interpreter that you trust, and then you will see it for yourself. I'll give some examples. Quran al-Islam. QuranAlislam.com. أن يكون الدين لله هو الظاهر العالي على سائر الأديان. That Islam must be supreme, superior above all the other religions. Ibn Kathir, that's the reference. HadiAlislam.com. It talks about total restitution. That's a nice term. Islamists want total restitution. Don't you want total restitution too? We all want restitution. But what does this total restitution mean in the Arabic? إن هذا المكر الذي يدبره أهل الباطل وهذا الظلم الواقع علينا وما يستخدم ضدنا من إجراءات استبدادية لمنعنا وحرماننا من حقوقنا الدستورية كل هذا غيره سينقلب بإذن الله. Here's what it means. This wickedness that the people of evil are doing against us. What have you done, evil Americans? It tells you right there. Preventing us from our constitutional rights. Muslims have a constitutional right. What is this constitutional right? It is aired in Muslim mosques. It is in Muslim demonstrations. It is all over, where the Muslim clergy will ask his constituents, ما هو دستوركم? What is your constitution? And the crowds will say, Al-Qur'anu dusturuna. The Quran is our constitution. Wait a minute. I thought Islam is a peaceful religion. I never knew Islam is also a peaceful ideology and a system of government. I thought it was a religion. Islam is simply a religion and Allah is simply the word for God. If Allah is simply the word for God and Allah is God, then why did I have to convert? Ask a Muslim. My Muslim friends, let's come to a table where we can dialogue. You talk about dialogue? Let's dialogue. You ask a Muslim, what is Allah? Allah is simply the word for God. Okay. Allah is simply the word for God. Yes. How does one become a Muslim? He will tell you, well, praise Allah, you're interested in Islam. Oh, yes, I am. How does one become a Muslim? Well, they say after me. There is no God but Allah. You say, okay, hold on a second. Let me repeat what you're saying here. Allah simply is the word for God. I'm supposed to repeat after you. Let me do that. There is no God but God. Oh, no. You got to say there is no God but Allah. Well, you told me that Allah is simply the word for God. If Allah is simply the word for God, all I have to do is say there is no God but God. And we can go to Starbucks coffee and have a good time. And we can get along. We don't have to argue anymore. There should be no more war. Peace. Peace at last. Oh, no. You got to say there's no God but Allah. And Muhammad is his messenger. Well, wait a minute here. I mean, I'm a Christian. I believe there's many messengers. Ezekiel is a messenger. Job is there's tons of messengers in the Bible. Is my way of salvation to say there is no God but Yahweh and Ezekiel is his messenger as a mandate for salvation? Blasphemy! I have just equated Ezekiel to be a mandate to be saved and equated him right next to God himself. I must believe that God exists and I must believe that Ezekiel is his messenger. What if I don't have the book of Ezekiel? What if I only have the book of John and I was saved in the book of John? I'm living in Africa and they're passing these tracts and I read the tract, I say praise Jesus, and that's all I had. I'm in serious trouble. I got to believe Ezekiel is his messenger. But you see, they say that it's blasphemy to believe Jesus is God. But what's blasphemy is to say in the Quran that Allah gave Muhammad al-Maqam al-Mahmud. We have given him the title that is after the title of God. God gave the title to Muhammad and attributed to Muhammad a name after his own name, which is al-Maqam al-Mahmud, the glorious one. Vic, if I called you the glorious one, what would that be? Blasphemy! The blasphemers accuse the non-blasphemers with blasphemy. Everything is upside down, yet we as Muslims could not see that. I got to read the Bible in order to see that, but how can I get to the Bible? I wanted to convert my wife to Islam. And in the process of trying to convert my wife to Islam, boy, women do it to you every time. It was two women that affected my life. God chose women. Muslims don't like that story. Women do it to you every time. My mother and father slept in separate rooms when I was a teenager. Never knew why. My mom and dad slept separately. Finally, my mom told me, there's a verse in the Quran. There's a verse in the Quran that says, فَإِذَا خَشَوْتُمْ نُسُوجَهُنَّ فَأَتْرِكُوهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ, which means, if you fear disobedience by your wife, which my mother was very disobedient. She was not a good Muslim wife. She could not wear hijab. She could not, she could not do anything Islamic right. So it says, leave them in bed. Don't sleep with them in the same bed. I used to have a bad habit. I smoked cigarettes. Everybody in Israel smokes. Jew, Palestinian, everybody smoked. My mom smoked menthols, and I didn't mind because I was desperate. And she used to hide her menthol under the couch where she slept in the room. I'd sneak in at nighttime and take a menthol, go to my window in my room, open the window, and, you know, huff and puff and get my nicotine fix, and that was a continual secret that I had. I saw a Bible under the cigarette pack, and I confronted my mother and I said, Mom, I'm going to tell my father about your smoking habit. She had to think like a smart American, very fast. She said, go ahead, tell your dad about the smoking habit, about me reading the Bible, and I'm going to tell him about your smoking habit. I said, what smoking habit? I don't have any smoking habit. She says, I'm your mother. I know all your secrets. All my secrets! So, we cracked a deal. My mom will give me a cigarette, smoke in her room. I'll keep my mouth shut about her reading the Bible. Now she could extend her legs and recline and read her Bible freely without this snitch going to dad and telling him everything, because my mother wanted to escape from the Palestinian areas and go to America. But she couldn't, because we would snitch on my mom. 35 years she was held in captivity, not allowed to go to her country. If Islam is a peaceful religion, how come there isn't a single Muslim country in the world that is signatory to the Hague Convention regarding the abduction of women? She was there illegally. She should be home. She went for a visit. Her visit was extended for 35 years. You can't go back to your country. You're Muslim now. Your children are Muslim. And so I began to ask my mother some questions about her Bible. I says, Mom, what does the Bible tell you? She said, well, it tells me everything. Isaiah says, for I am God and there is no other. I am God, there is none like me, foretelling the end from the beginning. I said, what kind of a God can tell the end from the beginning? He says, well, the Bible is very prophetic. It tells everything in advance. I said, well, I don't have much in the Quran that tells the future and the past. Are you talking that the Bible, are you saying the Bible is futurology 101? I mean, I know English 101, sociology 101, but futurology 101? Look, Mom, I'm not interested in this stuff. All what I want to know is, am I going to have a Palestinian state? Am I going to have a Palestinian state? It's a dream of every Palestinian to have a Palestinian state. She said, you'll have your state, but God will be angry. Why would God be angry? I thought God was on our side. Allah supports our cause, not the Jewish cause. Muhammad says that we will eliminate all the Jews. Muhammad said it very clearly in the hadith. لا تقوم الساعة حتى تغلب طائفة من المسلمين طائفة من اليهود. قيل أين يا رسول الله؟ قال في بيت المقدس وأكناف بيت المقدس. That the day of judgment shall not come to pass until the tribes of Islam defeat the tribes of Israel in Jerusalem and the surrounding nations, and then the trees will cry out and the stones will cry out, there's a Jew hiding behind me, come O Muslim, come and decapitate him, until no Jews are left. So we have a solution to the Jewish problem. How could God be angry at us having a Palestinian state? Where does it say that in the Bible anyway, Mother? So it says it in Joel chapter 3. In Joel chapter 3 it says, for I will gather all nations into the valley of Jehoshaphat. Then I will enter into judgment there with them on the account of my people, my heritage, Israel. And it spells it out right there. Whom they have scattered among the nations, they have also divided up my land. Pretty clear. The land will be divided and two states will be established. That was in 1976. In 1993, while I was trying to convert my Mexican-American wife to Islam, she asked me a question. Why should I leave my Christian faith? She said, you know, I don't understand. You say the Jews corrupted the Bible. All Muslims believe the Bible has been corrupted. Back to the first argument I started with my speech. She said, if you show me the corruptions, I will become Muslim. Oh, praise Allah. I'll find tons of corruptions. She says, what do you mean, find tons of corruptions? You never read it. Do you always make claims about a book you never read? So Shoebat chapter 1 verse 1, man thought he was smart, woman was smarter. I began to read, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between the devil and the woman. The devil will always hate the woman in Genesis chapter 3. Always. In every cult, the hatred of woman is part of a cult. Woman has half a brain. Who said that? I said that. That was a founder of Islam, Muhammad. Woman has half a brain. Woman's ability to testify in court is half the ability of her male counterpart. This is why we have rape epidemic in Pakistan, and when girls go and testify, they get punished. The victim gets punished. The victimizer, his testimony is more important than the testimony of a woman. She inherits half what a man inherits. My birth certificate says, father Muslim, mother Christian, child Muslim. And I was asked, why didn't my mother choose my faith? Well, الرجال قوامون على النساء. The men are superior to the woman. By the time I reached Daniel, it says regarding the Antichrist, he will not honor the desire of women. And by the time I became Christian and walked into churches and began to talk to Christians, I began to realize how oblivious many Christians in the West as to what the text says. We have traditions in churches, tradition of men, interpretations of men. They are read and they are what people believe without looking at the text. I learned fairly quickly that the Bible is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing if you allow the text to read itself to you, and it's a curse if you read into the text. We have tradition. They say Antichrist is homosexual. Evidence, he doesn't desire women. I said, where does it say that? Daniel 11. I learned a long time ago. When you examine what people say, you find out a lot of times it's not accurate. In fact, you and your friends should exercise that every time. Every time you talk Bible, say to yourselves, let's go and find it in the text. You'll end up finding it's not in the text. It doesn't say he doesn't desire women. It says he does not honor the desire of women. Now that makes a big difference. He will not honor the desire of women. Whatever woman desires, he doesn't care about. Why? Because it must fulfill Genesis chapter 3, always. Women don't count. Their desires don't count. Their needs and wants don't count. Who doesn't honor women's desires today? The Bible says also he honors a God of war. I was shocked. Daniel chapter 11, if I can move into that part. Are we allowed to read Bible in this place? Or should I walk out? We're not on a university campus. They're too educated for the Bible. Daniel chapter 11 verse 37, he shall regard neither the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall exalt himself above them all. But in their place he shall honor a God of fortresses. He honors a God of war. Who honors a God of war? You tell me who does not honor women's rights, and who honors a God of war. And a God which his fathers did not know, he shall honor with gold and silver and precious stones. Every Muslim honors a God of war, and jihad is part of Islam, and he honors him with gold and silver. What is zakah? Have you read zakah lately? Look up the word zakah and find out. Every Muslim must give a tribute to Allah of his gold and his silver. I read this as a Muslim. I go, how did the Bible predict how we think and what we do? Thus he shall act against the strongest fortresses with a foreign god. Wow. You ask Americans, Antichrist, what's his religion? He's atheist. Then tell me, what does that mean? Thus he shall act against the strongest fortresses with a foreign god. There is a god involved, and it's telling you it's a foreign god. And it's a god of war. And it doesn't honor women. And he attempts to change set times and set laws. What does that mean? Just what it says. It doesn't say he will change the cosmos. No one can change the cosmos, the laws of the universe No, just what it says. He will attempt to change set times and set laws. The holidays, no, your holidays don't count. His holidays count. America celebrates Eid. Have you heard of Eid lately? You need to have Islamic festivities now and celebrations. Change the laws, the constitutional government systems, the legal systems, all that must be changed to a different constitution that honors that foreign god that is a god of war. Just what it says. Yet it's hard to convince and convict my Western friends, and you want me to convince and convict my Muslim friends? You think they need to be convincing? You too need to be convincing. This is why I make it my business. When I have an audience of Muslims and Christians and Jews, I pick on the Muslims and the Christians and the Jews all equally. Because this is an equal opportunity employer, right? Which he shall acknowledge and advance its glory. Wow. And he shall cause them to rule over many and divide the land for gain. Divide the land. He will want the land to be divided. Satan wants the land of Israel divided. I wanted a Palestinian state. What side am I on? There's a different God. The God of the Bible is not the same as the God of Islam. Allah in the Quran had 99 names. Some of the names of Allah in the Quran should raise a flag, a red flag in everyone here. Even Muslims. No Muslim can deny what those mean. Why are one of the names of Allah in the Quran is Al-Mutakabbir, the most proud one. When I read the Bible, I found out who the most proud one is. It was the adversary. He is Malik al-Insi wal-Jinn. He is the Lord of the multitudes and the demons. What's jinn? Even the jinn believe in the Quran and became Muslim. The demons believe in Islam. He is Khairul Makirin, the greatest of all deceivers. He is Al-Mumit, the one who causes death. He is Ad-Dar, the afflictor, the one who causes affliction. All these titles are in the Bible. But it was not the titles of Yahweh of the Bible, they were the titles of the adversary. And in 1 John 2:22, when I read the Bible, I was shocked. 1 John 2:22. Who is the liar? God does not mince words in the Bible. You want to mince words? You want political correctness? Talk to Jimmy Carter. I'm not Jimmy Carter. I love Ronald Reagan. It says, who is the liar? God is telling you, who's the liar? He who denies that Jesus is the Christ, he is Antichrist, that denies the Father and the Son. Anyone that denies the Father and the Son is Antichrist. That will include all Muslims, peaceful or not. Ask any Muslim, why do you reject Christianity? And they will tell you. You believe God is our Father? Jesus is the Son of God? Blasphemy! What is most holy to Christians is the most blasphemous things to Muslims. The most blasphemous things to Muslims is the most holiest things to Christians. Why? God has no son. Who are you to dissect God in a microscope? Why do you ask the issues about God and his own being, how he is? We've never seen God. So why do you always want me to dissect God for you to show you how he is Trinity? Why don't you dissect what we do know? And what do we know? We know a lot. We know that God will fight this enemy. In fact, look at verse 39. Let me warn my Muslim friends. They are up against God and they will lose. In fact, when I examined this book, I found out that every verse in which a nation is mentioned that God is fighting with, every single one of those nations is Muslim. Every single one. God comes riding on a swift cloud. In Revelation chapter 14, it talks about God coming in the cloud. You want to know what God does when he comes in the cloud? Why don't you go to the Bible and find out what it says? Isaiah 19. The Lord comes riding on a swift cloud and is coming into Egypt. He comes to fight Egypt, a Muslim country. I thought Allah was on our, God is on our side. Habakkuk chapter 3. The Lord comes to fight Midian. Midian is the brother of Ishmael, the heart of Arabia. In fact, it tells us in the New Testament, the war will be between the children of Sarah and the children of Hagar. The children of Sarah that comes from Jerusalem, both physical and adopted, and the children of Hagar that comes from Sinai in Arabia. Every Muslim should examine what the Bible says about Arabia. It even predicted that Arabia will be destroyed and burned. And why does Islam also predict Arabia will be burned in end times? Because the adversary knows. He knows God's plan, and he knows he's going to lose in the end. How can he set up the Muslims for the fallout? And look what it says. Look what else it says. Verse 39. Thus he shall act against the strongest fortresses with a foreign god. He acts against the strongest military might. In other words, this adversary, what the Bible calls the Antichrist, declares war on the most powerful nation in the world. People ask me, is America in the Bible? Yes. Read between the lines. Who is the most strongest, powerful nation in the world militarily? Well, yeah, I am asking a question. None of you is raising his hand. If you don't know the answer to that question, why are you here? You said, God bless America. Who is the most strongest nation militarily in the world? You are. So get ready. He will declare war on the strongest fortresses, you. And people tell me, well, you know, he will defeat these fortresses. He will defeat these nations because he rules the whole world. Well, I got a surprise for you. I don't know if you have your Bibles. Go home and read it. Ezekiel chapter, I believe, 28 tells us something about this adversary, this Antichrist. Look what it says in verse 2 to 7. The Bible calls this man the Prince of Tyre, the Prince of Lebanon. Why is the Antichrist called the Prince of Lebanon? If he's European, he's called Pharaoh of Egypt. All these countries are Islamic. Look what it says when this Antichrist is captured. In verse 2, it calls the devil a man. Yet you are a man and not a god. When was this cherub who was in the garden a man? That's speaking when he invades a body of a man and he dwells into the body of this man. The man the Bible calls the Antichrist. When I read the Bible, I was shocked. I was shocked beyond belief when I read the book of Daniel. It says that the Antichrist will confirm a covenant for 7 years. He doesn't establish a peace treaty. He confirms a covenant for 7 years. Wow, shocking. That sounds like my Mahdi. The Mahdi of Islam creates 7 years of peace. How come my Mahdi is in the Bible, but he's the bad guy? In fact, the Prophet of Islam said, Al-Mahdi ta'us al-malaika alayhi jalabib an-nur. I memorized this stuff. The Mahdi is the peacock of all angels. Upon him is the cloaks of light. The most beautiful of all angels in the Bible is none other than the adversary, Lucifer. Shocking. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. Look at verse 7. Behold, therefore, I will bring strangers against you, the most terrible of the nations, the most powerful military might in the world will destroy him. Verse 8, they shall throw you down into the pit. They will take care of you and throw you into the pit. The most powerful military might in the world will take care of you. Yet when I talk to my Western friends, Antichrist, they say, well, that's the most powerful man on earth, or the most powerful military. He will lead the most powerful military. That's not true. That's why it's iron and clay, some weak and some strong. Oh, he got to rule the world. Where does it say that? If he rules the world, why does the Bible tell us about 10 horns, 10 toes, beast, composites, body of a leopard, feet of a bear, mouth of a lion? What's that all about? He rules the whole world, right? In Micah chapter 5, thou art Bethlehem, Ephratah, although you're the least from the clans of Judah, yet comes out of you the one to be the deliverer, the Messiah. Bethlehem is where the Messiah came from. I was born in the same village, yet I knew him not. And I persecuted his people until I ran into the road to Emmaus, and he said, why do you persecute me? I learned fairly quickly that even Paul was a terrorist. You don't want to believe me because I'm a terrorist? Don't believe Paul. He was also a terrorist. And I get in the media, and Americans cry out all the time, you know, wish we had people from the Middle East that would support us as a nation. Well, here we are. But as soon as we came out, you don't want to hear us. You're too, like a lightning rod. You got to mellow down. You got to moderate yourself. You know, be moderate, Christian. Be like a Jimmy Carter Christian. Jimmy Carter says to Larry King Live, you know, he says, the Christians that interpret the Bible literally, those are not real Christians. Oh, well, who is the real Christian? Jimmy Carter is. He is the example of Jesus Christ himself. I mean, after all, we just elected a president. You know, didn't you know he was the Messiah? Lately, he got a prize. He got a prize. Now he's the Prince of Peace. Jimmy Carter says that we should not be involved in politics. Christianity is not a religion where you're involved in politics. Excuse me. Controversies, you know. We shouldn't be involved in controversial issues. Well, the blood is very controversial. The cross is very controversial. Abortion is controversial. If you don't want any controversy, then there's nothing left. Everything is controversial. Jimmy Carter, if you say that Christians should be involved into politics, can you tell me why did you write that stupid book, Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid? If that's not about politics, I don't know what else is. I got it, Mr. Carter. I got it. Only the liberal Christian can be involved into politics. In fact, if you look at every liberal church, no exception, all they do is involvement in politics. That's all they do. What do you think Jeremiah Wright talks about? Social gospel. Politics. Mr. Obama, that is not the Jesus that I knew 1993. It's the same one you're talking about. You speak too funny. You don't talk like a Christian. I go to YouTube and plug your name, and I found out you criticizing the book of Deuteronomy. You criticize the book of Deuteronomy, the Beatitudes. You criticize the Bible. You attend a church that did nothing but criticize the Bible. Mr. Obama, I don't understand you. Yet when you go to the Muslim world, you hail the Quran. You hail the call to the prayers, the most beautiful call to the most beautiful sound he heard is the call to the prayer. Mr. Obama, when I became a Christian, my fellow Muslims wanted me dead. When you became a Christian, my fellow Muslims praised you. I'm sorry, but I got a country to save. I got a country to save. This coward named Nidal Malik opened fire on fellow Americans and killed them. And the news media tells us that, well, he had post-traumatic stress syndrome. What was that all about? Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! As he shot them dead. A country that gave him education, fed him and clothed him and loved him and cherished him. Is this how you turn the favor? Is this what God taught you? And then people tell me, well, how come the military doesn't understand what that's all about? I've been to your military. I went to your Air Force Academy. I was rejected. The Marines! God bless the Marines! The Marines invited me, then had to cancel. You know why? They had some visitors from Saudi Arabia, and they didn't want to offend them. So the event was canceled, the event just like this. The Army, I go through this all the time. The FBI, I have people. Oh, we cherish our 3,000 Muslim American soldiers. Why? Because they help us through translation work. Well, excuse me, I can get you 3,000 Coptic Egyptians who can translate Arabic, Assyrian Christians who can translate Arabic, Arabic Jews who can translate Arabic, Arab converts to Christianity who can translate Arabic. Why do they have to be Muslim? Well, Walid, you are racist. You're racist because you say that 3,000 Muslims should not work at the military. Excuse me, what is racist is to insist, to say that 3,000 Muslims should be working. We need Muslims, we have to have only Muslims to work. That's racism. Why can't I say, I want Christians to serve in the military? Why can't I say that? If that's racist, why is that also not racist? Why wasn't I mocked for talking or naming the word of Christ or Jesus or talking about witnessing to Muslims at the Air Force Academy, all over the papers? You see, when I got in the media, they told me, well, Mr. Shoebat, you know, if you're a confessed terrorist, don't you think you belong in prison? I said, sure. But the terrorism I did was in Israel. And I'd like for the Israeli government to arrest me and put me in prison. I'll do an aliyah. I'll go back to Israel. I'll go home. I love my home country too. Yes, I am a confessed terrorist. And I do belong in prison, but why is it that you only want the repentant terrorist to go to jail, while only the real terrorists in Guantanamo Bay should be released? I saw a country that many are becoming stupid. Many are becoming stupid. Stupidity is going through our system. And I saw that the only way is to be proactive Christian, not a reactive Christian. I began to learn that it's not writing a letter to the editor that makes a difference. But what makes a difference is brothers like Vic that could make events, that could go out and make the media and let people write to the editor and complain. You've got to make your case. You've got to go to the worst parts of this country. This is why I go to Michigan, the heaviest population of Muslims in Michigan. I go speak at Ann Arbor University with thousands of people. We lead the largest events in the country at the university campuses. And we spend so much money. We don't know where the money comes from, but somehow God provides. And everybody says, well, you charge too much. Oh, okay. Would you like to see how much we pay at a university campus? We go to the worst parts of this country to talk about the truth and to witness to Muslims and tell Muslims we love them. We just don't love the religion. Am I not free to say I don't love the religion? A Christian is a Christian is because he believes in nothing else. Do you believe in Mormonism if you're a Christian? No. Why? Why don't you believe in Mormonism? Because you believe Mormonism is false. Am I not allowed to believe that Mormonism is false? Buddhism is false? All the religions are false? No! I must only believe that Christianity is false. I go to the bookstores. God is Not Great by Christopher Hitchens. I said, with Christopher Hitchens, they write a book, Allah is Not Great. You must say Allahu Akbar, Allah is great. But why can't somebody say Allah is not great? Why is he only attacking predominantly the God of the Bible? The God delusion. Teaching your children about hell is worse than child molestation. That's what Richard Dawkins says. Teaching your children about hell is worse than child molestation? Can you imagine Mr. Dawkins? If he has children, somebody kidnaps his children, gives him makes one phone call. Mr. Dawkins, I got your children, man. You got two choices. No, I'm not asking for any ransom. There's two choices here. We've either get molested or they listen to a sermon. What's the sermon about? Hell. I'll take the sermon. Would you choose the other? We live in a world that's gone crazy. Yet we are the ones who are being viewed as crazy. We are not crazy. The world is gone mad. You believe in myth. So much of it. Terrorists distort Islamic text. No! Terrorists don't distort Islamic text. The Muslims distort the biblical text, creating the Quran, which is no Bible whatsoever, which teaches people that we must have a one world government and a one world religion and a one world language. My Muslim friends, why must an Iranian who doesn't speak Arabic, he has to pray to God only in the Arabic? A Turkish must pray to God only in the Arabic. Does your God not understand other languages? I was shocked to find out that the God of the Bible speaks every language on earth. The Christians go and translate the Bible to all the languages. Why? Big work. It sounds good to have one world. It sounds good to have one language. Islam, like communism, like any other ism in the world, it sounds good on paper only. They all sound good on paper. But in practicality, we've seen what it did. I've seen my country. My country has become the night of the living dead. I've seen Palestinian men carry the insides and internals of human beings, crying out as they eat the flesh, I will eat the flesh of my occupier. I've seen my country has become the night of the living dead, literally. I've seen Iraq. I've seen Fallujah and what happens to human beings, charred, mowed down to the ground, being dragged in the streets, burned and spat at. I've seen Afghanistan. I've seen Iran when Ahmadinejad is calling for his Mahdi, who will bring turmoil, not peace. I've seen evildoers want to spread out their evil in the name of peace. I've seen it all. I've seen my family die. I've seen my cousin Ra'id killed by the Israelis because he wanted to plant explosives in the streets of Ben Yehuda. I've seen my Aunt Fatima passing candy in the streets, saying Allahu Akbar. I've seen my cousin Walid Shoebat, woman suicide bomber. Her friend pushed the button. He exploded. She saw a Jewish woman rolling down with a stroller with an infant, and she was about to push her button to kill the emergency responders. She hesitated. She ended up in prison. She had a conscience of some sort. Many Muslims have conscience, but they have a conscience not because of Islam. They're peaceful not because of Islam. They're peaceful despite of Islam. I remember 9/11 when I saw the planes hit the Twin Towers. I thought these men were the martyrs when I was a Muslim. Then I saw the firemen go up while the smoke was billowing in the fire, knowing that they could die to save lives. Martyrdom is not suicide. Martyrdom is risking your own life to save the lives of people you don't even know. I began to learn, indeed, the martyrs were these firemen. But can I be right and 1.2 billion Muslims wrong? Yes. Noah was alone. He was right. And the whole globe drowned and died. Truth is not democratic. Truth is fact. Truth is truth. So my Muslim friends, I know you want to kill me. I know you want to take away my life. But you can never take away my freedom to speak. In fact, I asked my son, I said, every time I go speak, they ask me, are you not afraid for your life? 15-year-old child. He said, Dad, let me think about this for a minute. He walked around. He said, Dad, tell the people this. 15-year-old, wrote his first book. He said, tell the people this. Tell them we're all going to die. Every one of us here tonight is going to die, unless the rapture comes. You can die for something, or you can die of something. Make your choice. How do you like to die? You know, I wish I'd die of something, but in the process, I'll try my best to die for something. At least if I try to die for something, and I don't die for something, and I ended up dying of something, and I'm sitting in the hospital bed leaking through my orifices, I can tell my children and my grandchildren all kinds of heroic stories, all kinds of adventures, and my life means something. Not a boring life, and a life of a coward that can't speak out, that can't say the truth, that can't say what he feels deep down inside. Thus must be, lip service, political correctness. That's not what the America that I know. The America I know is to speak freely, including offensive speech. While Muslims can criticize me in this country, I dare them to allow me to speak the same things in theirs. I remember one Muslim student stood up and he says, you offend me, Mr. Shoebat. You offend me. You are very offensive. I said, maybe I am offensive, but freedom of speech is also freedom of offensive speech. I said, sir, men and women bled and died for your right to stand up here tonight to be offended. But the same men and women that died and bled for your right to be offended also died for my right not to care. Islam is a religious conditioning of the masses. They use illusion of misery, historic manipulation, and illusions of the virtues of the past, reflecting to the glory days when Islam was dominating the world. That's what it is. The aim of this Islamist movement is to convert masses to become angry, pride-filled, remorseless killers, seekers of salvation by the shedding of their own blood in warfare, in order to make Islam dominant, Muslims superior, and all non-Muslims subservient to Islam. This is what Islam, and there is no other definition that can be as more accurate as this. It proves it when you watch television. You can see it in the eyes of Ahmadinejad. You can see it in the streets of Palestine. You can see it in the streets of Cairo. You can see it on the Islamic websites in the Arabic language, that is. But yet you still want to deny it. If you don't believe me, then go to the streets of Cairo. If you don't believe me, then examine the Pew statistics. 55% of Pakistani Muslims support Al-Qaeda. More than 50% of Jordanian Muslims support Al-Qaeda. 73.2% of Arabs support jihadism. That was a survey conducted by Al Arabiya Network, an Arab entity, not even American or Western. During the Palestinian elections, they asked 113,000 Arabs all across the spectrum in the Middle East, who do you think do you want in the office in the Palestinian areas? You want Hamas or the PLO? 73.2% chose Hamas over the PLO. The facts are the facts. The statistics are accurate. But on the bright side, the other day, I was looking at Al Arabiya Net and at Al Jazeera, net in the internet, and I wanted to see, I'm not interested in the news. I'm simply interested in what the Muslims responded regarding what Nidal Malik did. I wanted to see what the reaction is. I was shocked. I was shocked. I had thought that I will find out more jihadism. No, to be fair, it was 50-50. 50% condemned Nidal Malik and 50% praised Nidal Malik. Wow. There are Muslims who are peaceful. Dig a little deeper. Why? What happened? Looking at their comments, the Kuwaiti Muslim said, we have seen what Saddam did in our country. We have seen the Americans come and liberate us from a tyrant. We've seen America in action. They've seen Americans bomb the Iraqis in the highway to hell when they raped Kuwait. They saw American valiant soldiers fighting for the rights of Muslims to have freedom. The Iraqi Muslims said, we have seen them in Iraq. We have seen them. We have seen America in action. America can shed its light. We have principles that we can fight with. We are not only fighting against terrorists, we are fighting against a principle. And America has done the job. They have done a great job in Iraq and Kuwait. They have showed mercy, love, kindness. America is not the enemy. Israel is not the enemy. The Jews is not the enemy. The enemy, my friends, is the one that the Bible talked about, the adversary, Lucifer. We have a mission. We can show the Muslim world the truth through love. But sometimes love for a shepherd means at times you gotta break the leg of a sheep. Sometimes love is tough love. The ones who care about you the most is the one that will hurt your feelings, not the ones who will tickle your ears and send you to hell. So my friends, stand up, stand tall. God bless the United States of America. God bless the Bible. Through the Bible, through the Word of God, through Jesus Christ, we will prevail. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Our eyes have been opened tonight. You may be seated just for a moment. Our eyes have been opened, seeing through eyes and seeing situations that many times are all obscured with the blurring media that we have. Walid, thank you for being with us. And it gives us good reason to pray for our country. And 2 Chronicles 7:14. Let's say it together. If my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked way, then will I hear from heaven
forgive their sin, and heal their land. Heavenly Father, we confess the callousness and the arrogance and the carnality that has plagued our country. And God, we see the zeal of those who are following false gods, where they are willing to sacrifice themselves, and oftentimes we are so addicted to convenience that we put our witness and our commitment last. Father, as we leave tonight, our hearts have been challenged, recognizing that you can take even one whose heart was committed to destruction and terrorism and give him the forgiveness and the grace that comes from Jesus Christ. I pray that you dismiss us as we leave and give us the courage to stand for what is right and to pray for our country, to live a life that's honoring to you. Dismiss us, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
Of heaven with the skulls of Jews. Uncle, is there a different way to go to heaven besides knocking on the gates of heaven with the skulls of them Jews? You asked too many questions. That trip, coming back from America, developed critical thinking. I was criticized all the time that I asked too many questions. The Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, said, كره الله قيل وقال وكثرة السؤال. Allah hated too many questions. Then I took another trip to Hebron. I took a taxi cab in Hebron, a Mercedes taxi cab, and when it reached to downtown Hebron, I witnessed something that began to make me think. There was a community of Jews that took a bus, a public bus, the Kiryat Arba community, and every time they get into that bus, Palestinians gathered together and began to hail stones at the bus. You could barely see the bus, had wire mesh bulletproof glass, and you could barely see the people in the bus because of the rocks like locusts. Of course, the taxi cab driver wanted to make a U-turn. I said, stop right here. I rolled down my window and I began to watch this incident. I began to talk to the taxi cab driver. I said, you know, why do we do this? Why do we stone this bus? He says, well, they're Jews. I says, well, so? Well, they shouldn't be here. I said, why not? Well, they're settlers. This is Palestinian land. I says, well, we have 1.2 million Palestinians living in Israel proper. They're in Jewish territory, in Israeli territory. No one stones their buses, and they worship towards Mecca 5 times a day. Nobody harasses them. You can take a prayer rug and go to Israel proper and pray in the street towards Mecca. Nobody harms you. Why can't these Jews live amongst us? I began to think, could it be racism? Could it be religious hatred? Could it be other things and besides the normal things that I was always taught, that the reason we as Muslims used to riot and get angry, maybe it's because of occupation. I began to review myself, and well, 3/4 of suicide bombing exist in Muslim countries that have no occupation. Could it be poverty? At one university, I remember speaking about the subject, and the professor stood up and he says, maybe, Walid, the reason we have terrorism is because there's poverty in the Muslim world. If we remove poverty, especially in the Palestinian areas, in Gaza, so on and so forth, perhaps we won't have any more suicide bombers. I says, well, you know, let me ask the students, see what they think. So I remember seeing a student from India with a big turban, Sikh.
our privilege to have with us tonight Walid Shoebat, who comes from the heritage of a grandfather who was a Muslim chieftain. Matter of fact, his great-grandfather was also a fighter, and that heritage continued on throughout the family. As a young man, he was a member of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and he participated himself in acts of terror and violence against Israel. He was later imprisoned in the Russian compound, which was Jerusalem's central prison, for incitement and violence against Israel. After his release, Walid continued his life of violence and rioting in Bethlehem and the Temple Mount. And after entering the United States, he worked as a counselor for the Arab Student Organization based in Chicago at a college there, and he continued his anti-Israeli and anti-Israel activities even in that position. But it was in 1993 that Walid had studied the Jewish Bible and a challenge to convert his wife to Islam. And after a number of months of intense study, he realized that everything he had been taught about Jews was a lie. His eyes were opened to the truth of Christianity. Walid is an American citizen. He lives here in the United States. He's authored numerous books, of which we mentioned here earlier, and on the back table here. He's been in high demand, appearing on national television and news shows all over the world and here across the United States, even within the last 24 to 36 hours. Let's give a warm welcome tonight to Walid Shoebat.
Thank you very much. You may be seated. Thank you. I don't know why it gets so uncomfortable for me when I see 1,000 or more people. But I should not be scared, because they are my fellow countrymen and people who would love me and support me. I don't even know why I carry notes with me. I rarely ever use them. It's like a baby blanket. Everyone has to have one, so I'll spread these things round about like this, and it'll take me half hour to warm up. Brother Vic told me that President Reagan spoke here. There's one favorite line I like that President Reagan said, that somebody in the crowd stood up and said, "Hail Reagan." Remember that scene? "Hail Reagan," treat him as a Nazi. And he responded, he said, "Ah, shut up." And I wanted him to answer the question. So I said, "Well, is anybody here from India?" And I acted like I wasn't looking at him. And as I turned around and he's raising his hand all excited, "I'm from India." I said to him, "Well, do you have poverty in your country?" He says, "We got lots of poverty, Mr. Shoebat, lots of poverty." You know that Indian accent? I said, "Do you guys have suicide bombing as a result of poverty?" He says, "Mr. Shoebat, we got lots of poverty in India. We don't blow ourselves up. But however, they come from Pakistan and for some reason they blow us up." Sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. Even the Pope made a statement. He said, "Islam must never be propagated through violence." Well, if I talk to any pastor in this place, Christian pastor, say, "Hey, we need a sermon. The title of the sermon should be, 'Christianity shall not be propagated through violence.'" They would love it. No problem. However, the Muslim world took offense to the Pope's remarks. So they took to the street, millions of Muslims worldwide, carrying a banner that says, "Islam means peace. Islam is a peaceful religion." And they expressed the peacefulness of Islam through sheer violence. If that doesn't explain it all, I don't know what else will. This is why I say I can go to a farm country in this beautiful land of America. I can speak to farmers who chew tobacco. And I can talk for a half hour on terrorism. And usually, somebody will stand up and go, "I get it." Yet when I go to university campuses, to the most educated of this country, and I speak till I'm blue at the face, they'll never get it. it an issue of education? If education is the place where if university is the place where we can have critical thinking, then why every time I go to university there's demonstrations outside? Well, Mr. Shoebat is racist. Am I? I don't understand. When I used to walk the streets of Chicago with thousands of Muslims demonstrating with a loudspeaker, who runs the Congress? Israel does. Who runs the media? Israel does. Khaybar, Khaybar ya Yahud, Jaysh Muhammad sawfa yaud. Jews will remind you of Khaybar. The army of Muhammad is coming back for you. If that's not racism, I don't know what else is. We're going to kill the Jews. A construction truck with a yellow license plate, which means it's an Israeli construction truck, accidentally struck a girl. And as he tried to call for help, he had a wireless in the truck, he tried to call for help to help the girl. And as soon as we saw the situation, we instantly carried rocks and began to stone the truck. As the guy was bleeding from his forehead, he's still calling for help for the girl. He finally realized that a crowd of 100 or so students surrounding the truck could be very detrimental for his health. He made a U-turn and got out of Dodge. We went back to school, of course, and the school body got together. We had 1,000 students in our school, just the same number as here. And we were trying to decide what to make up of this incident. And a blind student, blind since birth, rose his cane in the sky, and he says, by Allah, he struck that girl intentionally. The Jews want to kill Palestinians. This was done intentionally. And the entire school erupted in a riot in which they had to get riot control, tear gas, and there was some broken bones. It was a pretty bad situation. It took me years to rethink this scenario. It was only in 1993 when I began to read the Bible and I began to review my entire life. I asked myself a question. I said, that incident, that man was blind. How could he testify to an incident he could have never seen? But that's not the erroneous part of the story. The crazy part of the story is that how could 1,000 students follow him? Blind leading the blind is very usual in the Middle East. This is why I always like to say that the element of what's missing in our culture is critical thinking. I didn't learn critical thinking those days, of course. Only in 1993 I began to really think in a critical fashion. In 1991 I took a trip to the Middle East. I went back home. And as I started with my uncle on this trip, he was driving me in the cities of Ramallah, Nablus, Bethlehem, all over the place. I saw graffiti all over the walls. Now, my mind is not used to the graffiti that I grew up with all my life. I lived in America for a few years, and I asked my uncle, I said, Uncle, why do we have so much graffiti in our town and all the other towns? I couldn't find a square meter that didn't have graffiti. Either whitewashed graffiti or fresh graffiti. What did the graffiti say? The most famous graffiti that permeated the Palestinian streets was نقرع أبواب الجنة بجماجم اليهود. We knock on the gates. If it wasn't for my generation, you'll be saying hail to someone else. They can say that the Bible is corrupt, but we can't say the Quran is corrupt. Everyone can say that Christianity is a violent religion and the Bible is filled with violence. Yet none of us can say that Islam is violent. We must say that Islam is a peaceful religion, and that's what they tell me. You better say Islam is a peaceful religion, or we will kill you. The peaceful religion, my friends, is the one that when people curse at it, its followers pray for you. Christianity, my friend, is the peaceful religion. But I learned all my life as a child that the Bible has been corrupted. I grew up as a Muslim. The Bible has been changed. Who changed the Bible? Of course, the Jews changed the Bible. The Jews changed the Old Testament. The Christians changed the New Testament. In fact, virtually all Muslims believe the Bible has been corrupt. Finally, I learned, when I read the Bible in 1993, that indeed the Bible was corrupted. But before you throw tomatoes at me and crucify me, hear me out. The Islamic religion took pieces from the Apocrypha, pieces from the Bible, added its own ideology into the text, and created a new text which was the corruption of the Bible. The Quran is a corruption of the Bible. The corruptors accused the innocent of corruption. The haters accuse the ones who love with hate. They make the weddings funerals, and they make the funerals weddings. Everything is upside down, confusing to the whole world, and the whole world must kowtow and bow down to it and say that Islam is a peaceful religion. I once remember a little incident when I was a teenager in high school. I was going to school that day in Bethlehem. My school was next to a place that is a memorial for the Jews called Rachel's tomb. I never knew who Rachel was, neither did my Muslim teachers teach me who Rachel was, and every day I stand by the bus stop right there, look behind me, Rachel's tomb. Who was Rachel? Nobody said anything about Rachel. It was a place for the Jews. One time I was walking around about there, and